Psst, psst. Hi! Due to the way YouTube works, I want to make a quick announcement before this video. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like button or leaving a small comment. It really helps. If you feel like helping even more, you can check my Patreon or Ko-fi accounts. All the links are in the description box. Thank you! Greetings! In today's video, I want to have a bit of fun and experiment with some very specific supplies. I've realized that I'm slightly obsessed with the Cotman paints. It's not that I'm fond of them, but they intrigue me. They are affordable, everywhere, and they've been there for a while. I've ended up with a varied stock of this paint, in many forms. It gave me ideas for comparisons and tests. I'm also curious to see if eventually I'll find an iteration of these paints that I end up liking. See, the thing with me and these paints is that I generally find them really weak. Yet, I see a lot of great art made with them, so that made me curious. I want to see if I missed something. And have a bit of fun with these as well. In this first experiment video, I want to compare old Cotman pans to old Cotman tube paints. I've poured the tube paints into pans to let it dry. I'm interested to see if the tube paint formula is easier to re-wet or perhaps more vivid than the extruded pans formula. The pans are from my original Cotman palette that would be about 20 years old now. The tubes I can't say, but from their packaging design, they are not recent. I've had them for about 15 years. They were given to me by a relative. Some of the tubes were quite dry, so I had to use the tube squeezer to work some of the paste out. I will not use the mauve color in this comparison as it's recent and I also don't have an old version of that color. The colors I have are alizarin crimson hue, sap green, intense blue or phthalo blue, Payne's grey, ultramarine, burnt sienna, light red, cadmium yellow pale hue, burnt umber, and cerulean blue hue. I made a first series of comparative swatches, but there isn't much of a difference between both types of paint, if there is one. Most of the colors are the same in hue, with very minor differences in intensity. I get the impression that in general, the dried tube colors are a bit easier to re-wet. It's not a super striking difference though, and I'm not sure that it would really change anything in the end. It's fairly easy to wet the pre-made pans and let them soften a bit before using them. My second set of swatches, in which I tried the pans first and then the tubes, didn't really make for a stronger case in favor of the tube paints. However, one color was very different from tube to pan. The old tube of cerulean blue is much weaker than the pan. I noticed something weird about that color. If I look at the old tube's packaging, we can see that it's named cerulean blue. No mention of it being a hue. At the back, there's an health warning that this paint contains cobalt. The pigment info is a bit hard to read, but it lists this paint as being made with PB35, genuine cerulean blue. I tried to use that information to date the tube, but with no success. This Cotman cerulean blue is still fairly weak. It can be made a bit stronger if I let the paint soften for a couple of minutes, but it's still about half the intensity of the professional paints I have using the same pigment. It granulates slightly and spreads well wet in wet, even on this subpar watercolor paper. This concludes the first Cotman experiment, with a final impression that there's not a big difference between old pans and dried old tube paints. It was curious to see that this range had perhaps more of the same pigments as the professional range ones, even if diluted by extenders, as the cerulean blue has shown us. Thanks for watching, take care, bye bye!